My name is Sean Harrison. I'll be doing my educational thinker presentation for Education 504. The educational thinker that I decided to do my project on here, my assignment, is going to be Mr. Albert Bandura. This is my handout that I did make, and I posted it in Blackboard for everybody to see. Mr. Bandura is actually somebody who is still currently alive, so a lot of his work is actually being utilized in modern day educational development and a lot of educational experiments and theories, which I thought was pretty relative, especially considering this assignment. Some of the things we'll talk about today are going to be in regards to some of the facts that I found on him, a lot of his educational ideas, his influences, and that outside critique and my own personal critique, and I'm just going to jump right into it for you guys. Mr. Bandura, his biggest thing that he's known for is social learning theory. One of his biggest ideas is the actual social learning theory in itself. It's one of the educational foundations that is being utilized today. It's one of the things that's obviously something that you learn about in becoming an educator, and a professor, a teacher, a student of the educational realm in itself. But social learning theory can be summarized as learning through your environment, learning through your social context, essentially learning through people. With that, he's got some other things that pretty much go hand in hand with social learning theory. It's reciprocal determinism is one of the other theories that he brought up, or reciprocal triadic causation. Deals with your personal, your environment, and actually your behavior. And the way he kind of sums it up is, if those three things were a factor like a triangle, that if one thing will definitely affect the other, and vice versa. So they're all inter-influenced by one other's factors, and it's a continuum of change. That's one of the biggest things that he has also done a lot of his groundwork in, essentially. One of the more famous things that he's known for is the Bobo doll experiment. The Bobo doll experiment dealt with young children watching videos of adults interacting with a Bobo doll in violent mannerisms and in aggressive mannerisms. And the way that he was trying to experiment was to see if the children would follow up watching these videos, and then see if they would act in ideal mannerisms, or they would act in mannerisms that they just observed, or are going to be modeling after the adults themselves. And a lot of that experiment in itself, very highly criticized upon, as I found out. One of the big major criticisms that actually came from that, and especially with that time frame, it was back in the 50s and the 60s, and so what they were actually doing is, with the invention of television, they were predisposing children to acts of aggression, acts of violence, and to this day, that's very unethical. They very much have found out that predeposition of violence in itself is something that obviously you don't want to expose your children to, and back then probably not as big as a deal from a ethical standpoint, but nowadays it's very much something that is very highly criticized upon, as I found out a lot through the research that I did for that outside critique. With my own personal critique, being from a federal law enforcement background and still being a federal law enforcement official in itself, I deal with people that are having those traumatic events, having that worst day of their entire lives. And what I've come to find is, these people, even if predisposed to acts of violence, acts of domestic violence, things of that nature, they tend to go what I would call the 50-50 route. Some are going to use it as a source of strength. Some are going to use it as a position to never be in that place again. Very unlikely to find somebody who saw a traumatic event, witnessed it, lived through a traumatic event, turn into that very same traumatic event, the cause of that event. A lot of people that I've dealt with, essentially, it really comes down to that person's own personal choice. And with social learning, it kind of very much can be put both ways on the spectrum, that some people use it to their advantage and some people use it to literally mimic what they had witnessed as young adults and things like that, and their predisposition to aggressiveness and things of that nature. So I can see the argument both ways, but in my own personal experience, it really does come down to that person. Some of his educational influences that I did find out about is because of his Bobo doll experiment. He did follow-on experiments dealing with televised violence, essentially. And because of his work with the televised violence, he actually had to testify before the Federal Trade Commission, where some of his policies that were put into place he literally got them changed. So the violent cartoons that used to be on, way back when, way before, anything that you would see on television today, those are actually a lot because of him, which I thought was pretty cool. And it actually has rippled into, educational videos and things like that. But he has paved the way for a lot of modeling experience, a lot of modeling experiments to this day. He is one of the major, educators that has both put influence in current aspects and, his major contributions back in the 50s and 60s and so on. They've only been built upon. They've only been something that has been foundational to many things that have been studied, especially in the realm of education themselves. But with all that being said, guys, social learning theory is his biggest contribution to the name of the game. Many things I could put into this video, but I want to try and keep it under about 7 minutes in itself. But other than that, I really appreciate you guys listening and watching today. I'll be working with some of you in the week 5 slideshow, dealing with that. And I look forward to working with you guys. God bless, and have a great rest of your day.